But I think the way that Jim Zebrowski empowers Jalon Daniels, the way that he understands, hey, this is a guy that when he's playing with confidence and everything, he can really elevate the team.
Pay heed all who enter. Beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. Today, we're going to be talking about everything that has happened at Big 12 Media Days down in Frisco, Texas. As Kevin always says, it is technically the start of the football season. That's when you really start to feel like football season is starting. So that is unfolded today on Wednesday. Lance Leipold spoke. Jalon Daniels spoke. Multiple other players shared some thoughts as well. So we'll get into everything that was said, what it could mean for Kansas, and where KU goes from here, as they are basically 2 weeks away from the start of fall camp. Remember, because KU plays in week 0, they will be starting fall camp even earlier than they normally would be. So that's something to keep in mind as well. As always, if you have not already, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio, and also on our YouTube channel. Kevin, we got 1,000 subscribers. This is our first show since hitting over 1,000 subscribers. So thank you so much to those of you that have subscribed. Unfortunately, there was a major flaw in my suggestion of a firm handshake to the 1,000 subscriber, is that so many people subscribed all at once. I actually don't know who the legitimate 1,000 subscriber is. So if you can somehow prove to me that you are the 1,000 subscriber, a firm handshake is coming your way. But I was looking at the numbers and I was like, man, I guess I could like start to count backwards, but I can't count past like 12. So I kind of give up on that. There's a reason I talk about sports and I don't do.
I don't think they even really need proof, Nick. Like, I think they should just walk up to you and be like, I'm the 1,000th subscriber, and you can get about 50 firm handshakes out of this thing.
Well, see, that was my other thought. My other thought is like, I could just say, you know what? For every subscriber over 1,000, if you find me, you get a firm handshake. So then it's like a game of Where's Waldo of if you find me, you get a firm handshake.
There you go. There you go.
Whether it's out at football games, out and about. If you live in the Lawrence, Kansas City area, you might see me out and about. But
I might put out the odd tweet like, "Here's where Nick may be today," or whatever, just so people have a chance to partake in that handshake.
I'm not sure how comfortable I am with you just tweeting out my location at random times, but
I didn't say your address, but it's but at the same time, it's awesome that we've been so well supported by people. I mean, we haven't actually had this channel that long. I mean, for those, who were kind of day one people, we were on the overall KCSN, college sports channel. And so if you wanted to follow that channel, you were going to get your feed with K-State videos and Missouri videos and all that stuff. And so we went ahead and took the leap that, hey, if we're going to start our own channel, we're not going to start off with the built-in audience that was there, but we really felt like there was an audience for this show and that you guys would do a great job of supporting. And obviously we're so blessed that that's been the case with you guys.
And the positive side of that is we built an entire community of KU fans, right? You don't have to worry about any of those pesky K-State or Missouri fans in the comments, being annoying, doing what they do, which we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the show, by the way. But everything that Kevin said, absolutely couldn't echo it any louder. We really did kind of take a leap of faith, and it's been incredible to watch the show grow and to see people supporting, commenting on YouTube channel, sharing their thoughts, leaving us reviews on Apple and Spotify and all that good stuff. So if you haven't subscribed, again, please do so, because we are gearing up for what should be an absolute blast of a season, with KU football being back at home at the new booth this upcoming season. And obviously with Kansas basketball finalizing their roster. And I think people are feeling excited about where the trajectory of KU basketball is going to be heading this fall and winter and into the spring as well. So if you haven't already subscribed, now's the perfect time to do so, because we are going to be bringing you tons of content coming up this football season and in the next basketball season as well. So we're very excited about it. We're very excited for those of you that have been with us for so long since we started this thing, and we're hoping to continue trending upward. And we very, very much appreciate those that have supported us. So big thank you to you. Also, I wanted to, before we dive into the full Media Day stuff, Kevin, you got yourself some early access to College Football 26. Had a chance to
Kind
play
of.
with KU. Give me a quick rundown. I haven't gotten the game yet. It's Wednesday. I didn't get early access. I was on vacation actually, so I missed out on early access. So I decided, I'll just wait until the game comes out. But what initial thoughts on Kansas? And I know for you on PlayStation there was some glitches that have hindered
Yes.
your ability to play. But on Kansas in the game, what do you think?
Yeah, the glitch that Nick is talking about is on PlayStation. There for a while, you couldn't snap the ball on certain plays, and some people thought it was tied to plays with motion. Some people thought that it was whenever you would pull the play art back, which if you're not a college football fan, basically you pull the play art back so you can see what you're running. Basically, like, oh yeah, this guy's on a post, this guy's on this, and you can hot route and change guys around. So to not be able to snap it after that is kind of a big issue. I think I set a college football record for most delays of game in that first game that I played, because I'm really stubborn, Nick. Like after about the fifth or eighth, you probably should have stopped and just said, hey, you can't do this. But I went right through that thing and got like 30 of those, and actually unfortunately had Jalon throw a couple interceptions on like 3rd and 47 type situations where I was actually shocked when the ball snapped. So it was it was kind of a pain there. I did think some of the ratings and things are always interesting, Nick, because I feel like we're so insulated because we go to camp, we talk to players, and we were at all the spring practices, and so you come to have an idea of, even if it's not perfect, even if you say, okay, these two guys are competing for a guard spot, you have a pretty good feel for what the roster is. And the roster is not Caleb Brett at middle linebacker, which was one of the things on the day one roster. Leighton Cure was last of all the tight ends in rating, which I thought was kind of interesting. Keaton Kubeka got done pretty dirty and was like the 7th or 8th receiver behind both freshmen. Tate Nagy was not in the game that I saw, but Bryson Hayes is, Nick, and you will enjoy this, 95 speed on Bryson Hayes. So
there we go.
You got some money to throw in the slot and have some fun with some of the stuff there. Jackson Cook is a very good freshman as well. Jalon, I think, was an 87. The reason I say I think is because I hopped into dynasty mode, and as you know, Nick, if you have certain coaches, they make your players like a point or two better. And so Jalon, I think, was actually an 88 in dynasty when you added in the bonus from Zabrowski. LaShawn Williams and Daniel Highshaw, same exact rating. Williams was the starting back, and I don't think either of us believe that to necessarily be the case when they kick off. I actually think, and CBS wrote an article about this, Nick, that Daniel Highshaw was among the 20 or so players that they picked for a big breakout season this year, and that kind of echoes what I thought and felt through the spring. Overall, felt like a pretty good game. Some things changed. Haven't had enough time with it just yet to deliver a verdict. I will say the other part, though, if you're playing with Kansas and playing with the Lance Leipold that does not look like Lance Leipold at all, year 2 could be a little bit of a bear, because we've seen Kansas put together this great recruiting class in real life. You're going to have to do that too, because a lot of the guys that are leaving, you've got to replace some guys and replace a bunch of them. The one thing that I haven't gotten to this part, though, Nick, my understanding is that the portal is a much better tool and easier to use tool this year than it was a year ago, where you might only have 2 guys in the portal that you would even want for your team.
Yeah, I think that was a big critique of the previous year's game, which was that the transfer portal didn't feel like it had as big of an impact as maybe it had in real life. So in this game, it seems like they maybe adjusted that. We'll see if it's too much, right? I mean, you don't want to have 35 guys transferring every single season, but you want it to be a little bit more realistic. And I think that's what college football fans are looking for. And yeah, well, listen, the people at EA, the people that help create the game, there's only so much they can do to really get deep knowledge of every single. I mean, we're talking about 140 teams, right? So there's going to be some mistakes. There's going to be some players that are maybe in different spots. There's going to be, obviously, there's always the great debates about ratings. This player should be rated higher. This player should be rated lower. It is what it is. But I'm excited for it. And to me, it's another sign that football season's right around the corner with that game coming out also. One more quick thing before we get to the media day stuff. There was some very quick basketball news that I want to touch on from earlier in the week on Monday that I think there was some confusion about what it was. And that is that Noah Shelby, who previously was at Vanderbilt, then at Rice, came to Kansas as actually a walk-on last season, entered the transfer portal on Monday. And there was some confusion about how that was possible and what led to that. And basically, without trying to get too confusing about it, I'll try to keep this explanation as simple as possible. When the new rev sharing agreement went into effect on July 1st, part of that, and we've talked about this a lot with the football side, we haven't talked about it as much on the basketball side, but part of that agreement was hard roster limits, a hard cap on your number on the players you can have on your roster. For football, it's 105. For basketball, it's I think 14 or 15. I think it's 15 actually. And so part of that discussion that went into that is a lot of these programs have many more players over that number who are walk-ons, preferred walk-ons, whatever it may be. And we actually saw it back in the spring. Kansas had a lot of players who were walk-ons depart their program because there was a lot of uncertainty about whether or not under this new rev sharing agreement would walk-ons be grandfathered into that number, or would it be, nope, you got to get to 105 and you got to get rid of anybody else. And it turned out that there was a provision in there to grandfather those players in. And so on the basketball side, as part of that, those players are grandfathered into the roster. And the NCAA decided on a Monday of this week to open up basically a second transfer portal window specifically for those players who were waiting to basically find out if their roster spot on their current team was secure or not.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And as a result of that, they opened up that second window for players who were grandfathered in, but wanted to transfer, right? So essentially, if you look at it from the perspective of Noah Shelby, it's like, okay, he could have transferred during the previous window, but only if he thought that Kansas was going to not have him on the team anymore because they were going to need to get under that roster limit. It ends up being that he's grandfathered in, but now he wants to go and have a chance to play somewhere else because I think you and I both agree he probably would not have been playing very much in Lawrence this season. And so the flip side of that also is that Kansas doesn't technically have another open spot, but I am under the impression that they could go and add another player who has entered the transfer portal that is also a grandfathered player, and it would not count against the number of players they have. Technically, KU does have one more roster spot available, just generally speaking. Like they could add another player just generally. But if they wanted to add a second player on top of that, they now could, as long as it's a player who has entered the transfer portal during this window as a walk-on, essentially, that's been grandfathered in under the roster limits and then could join the team. That is my understanding of it, I think, is how it works. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that and see what Kansas does. Feels as though, and we obviously talked about it a couple weeks ago, it feels as though Kansas roster is pretty well set, barring, I could see an outcome where a Johnny Furphy-esque type player, I'm not saying Johnny Furphy specifically, but international player that maybe wants to explore NCAA options could join the team. And obviously Kansas has an open scholarship. Maybe specifically for that reason, they decided to leave it open, but we'll see where things go from there. So what do you say we talk some football now? We get into the Media Day stuff, the real meat and potatoes of Big 12 Media Day. We'll get to that coming up right after this. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Folks, there's nothing that beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching some baseball. And there's no simpler way to get in on the action than by downloading the Pick 6 app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. And the best part, Pick 6 is available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on the fun. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6, and right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Bonus picks expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. Mentioned at the top of the show, we've got over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thanks so much to those of you that have subscribed. And if you have not, all you got to do is click one button, that subscribe button, and join our growing Jayhawk community. We're going to be doing some live shows over our YouTube channel after KU football games throughout the season. So you'll absolutely want to be subscribed over there so you can get instant reaction and so on and so forth. And if you're on the audio side as well, you can subscribe as well. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate those of you that have done that as well. Before we get specifically into everything that happens surrounding KU with Lance Leipold, Jalon Daniels, and all that stuff, just kind of broadly, Media Days is also an opportunity for Brett Yormark to speak quite a bit about the state of the Big 12 and where things are at. And there was really one thing specifically that he said. He said a lot of things. Look, for people that have listened to Rock Chalk Sports Talk even prior to this show, you know that I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Brett Yormark. I think he is sometimes so smart, but also so sadistic in some of the ideas that he has for the Big 12, that he's the type of person where he's got a great creative mind, I think, but you got to kind of keep him on the rails. He's had some crazy ideas. But one thing that was new for this season for the Big 12 that I specifically want to talk about with you, Kevin, here is Brett Yormark said Big 12 preseason polls, no more. Getting rid of the Big 12 preseason poll. And part of Yormark's explanation basically was, hey, it's detrimental to the Big 12 because the Big 12 has a lot of parity, as we saw with Arizona State being a team that was picked to be at the bottom of the conference last year, winning the conference. And basically the argument being, when you have situations like that where teams quote unquote overperform their expectations, it hurts them in terms of what their rankings could be, right? Like if Arizona State was picked to finish 15th in the Big 12 and they win the Big 12 conference versus they were picked to finish second in the Big 12 and they win the Big 12 conference, the idea is that if they were picked to finish second, there would be an inherent more bias there positively towards them versus negative bias if they're picked near the bottom of the conference. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? What's your take on no more preseason polls? Obviously, it gives us a lot less to talk about because now we can't say, oh my gosh, Kansas was picked here. Back and forth. But overall, I was just curious what you thought about that.
I think it's a little silly because I'll be honest with you. Part of me, it's funny you say that about Brett Yormark. I used to have an editor like that who come up with the best ideas, like creative ways to look at something that was off the beaten path. Hey, have you tried this angle with the story? Oh, that's great. But then there were some times that you almost had to rein him in a little bit and be like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like that would never work. And
like playing the Big 12 tournament in New York City.
Yeah. And so there's definitely that. I get where he's coming from because I do think that there's a perception there that, hey, this team was picked to finish last. They're having a great season, but how good can they really be if everybody thought that they stunk? The issue is, Nick, you're removing the Big 12 poll, but you're not removing every poll. You're not removing every ranking. You're not calling up Lindy's and being like, don't rank the Big 12 in Lindy's or Athlon or Phil Steele, and I bring that up because, I had a hand in writing the Big 12 preview for Lindy's. And so when you look at it from that perspective, people are still going to go different places and see the rankings. And so even if it's not, well, the Big 12 media thought these would be here, you're still going to have enough rankings out there, whether it's ESPN's FPI, which I know is a computer-based ranking and is awful, and different people ranking. You can still go out there and find, like, okay, what did people think about Arizona before the season started? And you can find that. And so I don't think that removing the Big 12 poll itself is going to really change anything. Like you said, it does take away a talking point where you're like, man, the Big 12 media really doesn't believe in Kansas this year or whatever. But I don't think that for what he's talking about, and again, like, I get the general point that a team that's ranked really low, if they're 6-1, 7-8 weeks into the season, and it looks like they're pretty good, they might not be getting the benefit of the doubt nationally because everybody thought, hey, this team is not actually that good. And in the Big 12's case, there's a national perception that there are no elite teams in the Big 12, true or untrue. And, last year it was probably fairly true. I mean, Arizona State, I believe, lost to Cincinnati, at one point. Could have lost very easily to Kansas in Tempe, and got a touchdown in the final 20 seconds to win that game. And so there's not necessarily that elite of the elite team in there. And I think that's the perception of it. And so even if you win the Big 12, if you go 10-2 or whatever your record may be, I think there's still a feeling of, well, they probably just didn't have to beat anybody to get there, or the schedule fell their way, or A, B, or C. The issue is, again, like, removing the Big 12 poll doesn't change that. I don't think people still have the ability to go and look at all that. We've talked on the show last year, Nick. I thought Arizona State was a year away. I thought Arizona State would be good this year with all the young guys that they had, all the non-seniors that they had. And I put that in my preview, sort of hey, Arizona State's going to take their lumps this year, but this is a talented team and they're going to be pretty good, in 2025. Turns out they're a year ahead of schedule. And I do think that early perception maybe harmed them from a national perspective standpoint when it came to rankings and all of that. But I don't think that removing one poll is going to change people's ability to find out what people think of that team heading into the year.
Yeah, on the surface, I think it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to basically give a level playing field to every team in your conference to where they do have the benefit of the doubt, or of not having any bias against them potentially if they were maybe picked lower in the preseason poll. But kind of as you outlined, first of all, it's impossible to eliminate all bias, right? I mean, that's inherently part of I think part of human nature, truthfully, when it comes to these types of things. And then on top of that, you're right. There's still going to be the AP Top 25. There's still going to be every other poll around the country that's going to be ranking what they think the team should be in the preseason. So if you were able to eliminate every poll in existence, then okay, maybe, sure. But at the end of the day, I kind of tend to agree with you. I don't think it's going to change that much of the perception, right? Like,
Brock Osweiler said today for ESPNU, was asked who could be this year's Arizona State, and he picked KU and Utah. And I think, Nick, as KU guys, we know KU is typically being picked 7th or 8th, kind of right in that middle, just behind, sort of the teams that a lot of people feel are quote unquote contenders. And I think that if Kansas winds up having that kind of run, being 10-2, going to the Big 12 title game, and they're saying, hey, can the Big 12 maybe get two teams in? People are still going to be able to look at Kansas and be like, well, what did people think before the season? And they can find that even though there was no Big 12 poll this year.
Yeah. Let's get into what Lance Leipold had to say. He spoke quite a bit today on Wednesday at Big 12 Media Days, had a lot of interesting things to say. Couple common denominators was, one, Jalon Daniels was talked about a lot, and I think probably for good reason, truthfully. The other note, and we were kind of talking about this before we even started recording today's show.
Sure.
The other interesting thing is, feels like this year, kind of across the board, there wasn't as much maybe like team news from different teams around the league of like, oh, this is a player to watch, like these are guys to watch, or injuries, whatever it may be. The one big note for Kansas was Bryce Foster was originally expected to be at Big 12 Media Days. Then he didn't show up. And then Lance Leipold revealed on Wednesday afternoon that he had tweaked an injury, didn't really go into specific details about it, and basically said that he needed to undergo some minor surgery. The positive news on that is that Lance Leipold did not seem concerned about it, and that they expect Bryce Foster to be good to go by around the start of fall camp. So he might not be 100% by the time fall camp starts, but expecting no limitations basically at the end of fall camp and into the start of the season, which is huge news because Bryce Foster was the only Kansas player picked to the All Big 12 team.
Yeah.
So, and obviously we know how good he is and how important he will be for Kansas this season. So that's fantastic news that he is going to be healthy. And I think you would take the trade off of Bryce Foster not coming to media days versus making sure he's fully healthy heading into the season. So wanted to touch on that as well. But for Lance Leipold, again, a lot of Jalon Daniels discussion, which I think was fair. A lot of talk about the new stadium. One particular quote I think really stood out to me, Kevin, is Lance Leipold talking about Kansas football and saying, who's investing more money in football right now than KU? And when you look at what KU's doing with the football stadium, he's kind of got a point right now. Like it's obvious that Lance Leipold and Travis Goff and the entirety of the Kansas athletic department and Kansas donors are in full support of the football stadium and making sure that it's going to be a really cool thing once it gets to August 23rd, which is the first game. And then obviously going even further into the future of completing the entire project and turning it into the entire gateway of what it was kind of envisioned to be in the first place.
Yeah, people seem to have a lot of mixed feelings about that quote. And part of the reason Kansas is spending so much, Nick, is because it took so long, right, to start addressing Memorial Stadium when everybody else was building up their stuff, in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Kansas wasn't. And so now the bill has come due. It's expensive. And I think you can feel both ways, right? You can feel like, well, this should have been done a long time ago, while also sort of crediting Lance Leipold for giving a product that people want to donate to and pay money for the stadium. Travis Goff for being able to take advantage of that and having the vision of, hey, we got our first, little sparks of success. Let's start a fire. And the donors and boosters for stepping up in that regard. And Nick is somebody that we've talked about. I've gotten to tour, the new booth. It's not something that's just a facelift, right? Like they're rebuilding this thing and it's beautiful and new and has all these great things about it. It's not a fresh coat of paint. And so I think that's the other thing that adds up to that cost. And the other thing that I'd say just real quick about it, my neighbor, when we moved in here, Nick, like they did the inspection process and everything as you do when you get a house. And they wound up having a flood shortly after moving in. And it turns out that one of the contractors working on the house, when he was working on it, put a screw into the wall and hit a pipe and basically poked a hole in a pipe. And it wasn't something that you would find through inspections, right? It's in the wall. But at that point, it's not about what happened in the past or the fact that guy did. It's about, hey, I've got a leak in my house that I need to fix. And I think that Goff and the KU administration deserves a lot of credit for really attacking that and saying, look, would this have been a lot cheaper if it had been done in 2015 or 2010 or, just capitalizing on the Orange Bowl year and starting in 2008? Yeah, but there's a leak here and it's got to be plumbed whatever happened before. And I think they've done a good job of that.
Yeah. And I would reiterate this, which is, and you mentioned it, this is about as a total rebuild as you could possibly get.
Oh, I mean, people won't recognize it.
It's complete. I mean, it was completely tore down, the entire side of the stadium, the west side of the stadium. And obviously the eastern side is still up and the plans to fully rebuild that side will then happen after the 2025 season, I think. And so yeah, it'll be night and day, I think. And I think you'll kind of already get to recognize that. Like, I almost wonder if the fact that it's going to be not fully completed, it's, you'll have sort of the old 1/3, almost half the stadium, will almost maybe put it even into more perspective of like just the absolute, so much requirement needed to build what they've done, because you'll get to see the new versus the old a little bit. If you're a fan going to games, you get to experience the new side versus that old side that they're going to be finishing after the season. So I almost wonder if that'll further drive that point home. But yeah, it's very exciting. And I think even more so, you consider, we talked about it before already on the show, but you can't really overestimate the power of a home crowd, and especially at your home stadium, and especially, going through your regular pregame where you're not in a foreign locker room, you're not in Arrowhead Stadium, right? All those things, like that's going to add up. And so I think that's really, really cool what Kansas has done to this point. And I'm hoping that they're able to have a very successful rollout of the new stadium, because I think KU fans have earned it. KU fans have earned it waiting for a new stadium like this. And obviously the players and everybody else have earned it as well through what they've done over the past handful of years under Lance Leipold to get to this moment. So, and, Travis Goff has made pretty clear statements several times of, the stadium is not a thing without players like Devin Neal, who are never going to play in it, but obviously had a major impact in getting Kansas to a situation where they could achieve it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we're getting so close to that point. And one of the good things to come from Big 12 Media Days, Michael Swain had a chance to talk to Travis Goff and kind of get an update on it. And it sounds like everything is it's going to be full go for that opener against Fresno State, which he had said kind of all along. Like, I think the last time we talked to him was May, and he was kind of like, everything's on pace. It's going to get done. But at the same time, here you are, a month and a week or two away from that opener, and to hear that, hey, it is all going to be ready when they roll that thing out, it is certainly an awesome update.
Yeah, and then Lance Leipold may have let something slip, Kevin, in regards to a certain game on KU's schedule that I think is going to have some people's attention as well, when talking about the fact that KU is going to be playing Missouri for the first time in quite some time in football, and Lance Leipold basically letting a comment slip of not realizing how significant that rivalry was as compared to the KU K-State rivalry. And for many Kansas fans, that's not a surprise. I mean, the KU Missouri rivalry has, if you're a fan of history like myself, you should know that the KU Missouri rivalry has real blood behind it, like legitimate. We're talking 1860s border raids on both sides. Like, this is a very real historical rivalry, even going beyond athletics, beyond, two college institutions. We're talking about real legit blood for blood rivalry between these two sides. And so absolutely it means more. And I thought that was an interesting quote from Lance Leipold. Obviously, I guess for him, he maybe wouldn't know that, being at Wisconsin Whitewater and then Buffalo or whatever, and not being familiar with the fact that these two schools have that rivalry, and also the fact that they haven't played in a dozen years. But I think that's going to stoke some fuel to the fire, I think, for the KU K-State rivalry with what Lance Leipold said. And certainly it's going to add to the importance of that game at Missouri, which we already know is probably going to be a big challenge for Kansas. But I think certainly is a game that we're excited about, just because it is returning, right? And that's something that I'd be curious to get your thoughts. But, for me personally, I've gone back and forth over the better part of 8 years or so. I think initially when Missouri left, there was a lot of good riddance, screw you, we don't want to, whatever, out of sight, out of mind type thing. But there was also a segment of fans who lamented the loss of that game, right? And I think I was part of that. And then there was a time period where I was like, you know what? We don't need to play these guys. They're a bunch of clowns anyways. I don't want to play Missouri. But even then, like, there is still a part of it that I think it's better for the game. It's better for the sport. It's better for college athletics when you have rivalries like this that are being played, even if it maybe it's not quite the same because you're not conference foes, which adds another level to it. But I don't know. I've kind of come around on it to say it's a fun rivalry. It should be something that should be played, I guess.
Yeah, the irony of it is when it happened, I think if you did polls anywhere when Jeff Long announced that the rivalry was going to return, I think it was grossly unpopular among Kansas fans. And
Yeah.
Maybe they were the vocal minority, but Nick, I really don't think so. Like, I think most Kansas fans had moved to a spot where it's like, well, we haven't played them in 5 or 6 years and my grass is still growing, whatever else. Like, I don't need that part in my life anymore. And I 100% agree with you in that, I get that part of it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, man, this is a classic, college football rivalry. It is one of those things that people get really excited for. And you can maybe not even have the season that you're anticipating having. And if you beat your rival, it can be one of those things that keeps you warm in winter, type of deal. And so I do think it's good for the return of it. It's interesting because I think, I'm not saying national people don't realize that it's that kind of, but I don't think they realize the extent to which it's a rivalry. I mean, you're talking about a rivalry where they don't even agree on what the record is. I mean, the KU and the NCAA have it, 56 and 55 and ties, and Missouri has it 57-54 and ties because of that 1960 game. And so, what better for a rivalry than one, hatred, historical hatred, and you can't even agree how many games both teams have won. I mean, I think there are games where you've had, like the game where you have Michigan and Ohio State, and they're usually ranked and it's a national thing. But for pound, this person does not like that person because they went to this school and all of those things. I'm not sure there are many rivalries with just the sheer level of vitriol that Kansas and Missouri brings out. And it's going to be a wild one in Columbia, to be frank.
Yeah. And look, in the modern athletics situation of college athletics, where so much is changing, so much is shifting, you have these bizarre conferences with Cal, Stanford, and the ACC, like crazy stuff, right? Sort of the one, I think, thing that kind of ties back to that traditional era of college athletics is those types of rivalries, right? Like those are the things that I think you can cling to for that sort of traditional style. And maybe we get back to it one day where it's a little bit more when whatever it may be, but that you can cling to that. And so, I think it's a situation where, again, maybe there was a time period where it was unpopular to play Missouri again, but at the same time, I think now that it's here, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited for it.
Oh, I'm fired up. I'm excited to see it and everything. It should be a good time. Obviously, both of us know Gabe really well from his time at Power Mizzou and his time here at KC Sports Network, and look forward to seeing him on game day and everything. It should be a really good time, and it's going to be as hostile an atmosphere as Kansas has been in probably in the last 10 or 15 years at least. I will say I've seen a lot of Missouri fans saying that it will be the loudest that KU's played in. Nick, you were there last year. I thought K-State was incredibly loud last year, and K-State usually brings it against Kansas, but I think that the fact that Kansas had kind of tightened that gap a little bit, they knew it was a big game. I think some of these Kansas guys that were there for last year's game, I don't know if they're going to come out of Columbia saying, "Oh, that was the most brutal atmosphere we've played in," but I do think that it's going to be up there, certainly.
Well, we'll see if there's bags of urine thrown at the players. Maybe they might feel a little bit.
It's going to be bags of urine thrown at you and I, Nick.
Boy, I hope not. I hope not. But yeah, should be an exciting game. Certainly one to look forward to. Let's dive a little bit more into Jalon Daniels. Talk a little bit more about what was said today at Big 12 Media Days. We'll take one more quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank. your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Once again, I would just remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, over on a YouTube channel. You can share a comment. You can join in with tons of other great KU fans that share their thoughts with us. We really appreciate those that do so. You can also find us on social media at PayheatKCSN is our podcast account on Twitter. I'm never going to call it X. Sorry. I'll always Twitter to me.
You and Brett Yormark both. Brett Yormark went through his whole conference yesterday and was basically like Twitter.
Okay, well, there you go. There is at least one thing me and Brett Yormark can agree on. The other thing I really wanted to talk about, and was really a pretty big storyline of the day today from the Kansas perspective, was Jalon Daniels. And I think rightfully so. I even said earlier in the offseason, this season in particular feels like it will, so much of the success or failure of Kansas on the field this year is going to rest on the shoulders of Jalon Daniels, because no more Devin Neal, no more great trio of receivers. The pressure is really fully on Jalon Daniels. And I think he seems to be kind of embracing that. If you got a chance to watch some of his interviews and some of what he said on some of the ESPN platforms, there was a great segment with him breaking down some film with Greg McElroy, which is a really cool insight into Jalon Daniels, maybe how he thinks about the game, what his mindset is in the game, and so that was really cool. So he seems to be handling it pretty well. But obviously this is a huge season for Jalon, Kevin, because as I said, I think this team will go as far as he goes this year. And with Jim Zebrowski taking over as offensive coordinator, which, by the way, the one thing we didn't talk about was there was a bit of an awkward question to Lance Leipold about the, not my words, the quote unquote debacle of the offense last season. I think I know how you feel about it, Kevin, because Kansas statistically was one of the best offenses in the conference in the second half of the season. Yes, there was obviously a lot of struggles early in the year between Jeff Grimes and I think between Jalon Daniels sort of spinning his wheels a little bit to start the season, getting off to a slower start. But even Lance Leipold himself said that debacle was probably too strong of a word, which I would agree with that. I understand. I think a lot of KU fans feel somewhat strongly about Jeff Grimes and maybe how the season unfolded, but at the end of the day, the offense is really good down the stretch, except for the Baylor game, I guess, to end the year. But beyond that, it wasn't a debacle. I'll say that. So that was kind of a funny moment. But certainly with Jalon's in his situation, having Zebrowski now as the offensive coordinator, having a fully healthy offseason, that was mentioned a number of times by Lance Leipold, talking about Jalon being fully healthy, which is significant. But certainly it feels like, Kevin, this season, it's going to come down to what JD6 can do on the field for Kansas to have success.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, it was telling, I think, watching him break down the film with Greg McElroy on the last of those plays. He was talking about his relationship with Jim Zebrowski and basically said, yeah, you know, Coach Zebrowski had told me if I saw this look and I liked it at the time from Iowa State's defense, to basically audible into the shot play and go for it. And Jalon's like, I got it. I made the call. It winds up being a huge play to Quentin Skinner. But I think the way that Jim Zebrowski empowers Jalon Daniels, the way that he understands, hey, this is a guy that when he's playing with confidence and everything, he can really elevate the team. It's funny. I think they're probably maybe more talented than 02, Nick, but I look at this year a lot like 02, where they got off to that hot, like 5-0 start. You get College game day, you know, Jalon's emerging as a guy. And the reason I say that is, you know, Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, and LJ Arnold weren't Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, and LJ Arnold yet. Devin Neal was coming off of his freshman year where he was pretty good, especially down the end, but he wasn't Devin Neal all caps yet. And I think you're going to see some of that with this offense this year, right? You're going to see Daniel Highshaw, I think, has a chance to be a really good back. And when you pair LaShawn Williams with him, I think they're going to have a good offensive line again. You're going to have Jalon Daniels. You're going to have the running game. I think you're going to have a receiving group that kind of like that group from that year. By the middle of the season, we're going to look at it and be like, oh, Emmanuel Henderson, you know, Cam Pickett, and these guys they're pretty solid. And so I look at it in a very similar way, and you think about how Jalon was kind of the heartbeat of that team and the way that they started. Of course, he wound up getting hurt. You wind up being 6-6. But I think if you looked at where Kansas was as a program at that point, if Jalon had stayed healthy, they might have been 8-4. They might have been 9-3 if he had been healthy through that whole season. And so I do think there's a lot on Jalon's back. I think the way that Jalon impacts this program, not just through his play, but the emotional way that he reacts. You look at that West Virginia game that they won back in 2002. West Virginia would score, and it was just sort of like Jalon's like, well, cool, we get the ball back, and now we get to go score. and everybody on the sideline believed it. And I think that when you look at the second half of the season that he had last year, you were getting back to that a lot more. But I think a lot of people missed it, especially nationally, because of the fact that he had the rough start to the season. And so you'll get people in my mentions like, oh, Jalon's a turnover machine, whatever else. Well, he hasn't traditionally been in his career, and he wasn't really the second half of the season. And I think when you look at him being healthy, him getting a chance to work out with the wide receivers, Leipold mentioned that I think he flew out the receivers at one point to California. So I think you're not going to have a similar situation where Jalon's going to start off rusty, where he's not going to have chemistry with these guys. I think they're going to hit the ground running, Nick. And I think that's exactly what Kansas needs, because I think Kansas may need to outscore Fresno State as some of the offense some of the defense sort of starts figuring things out. Kansas may need to outscore Missouri if you're going to win in Columbia. And those are games that you feel a lot better if Jalon Daniels is sort of Jalon Daniels with the 5 exclamation points after his name. And Leipold made another good point when he was talking to ESPNU, where he said basically, hey, this is a guy that a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about as one of the best players in the entire country. And because of what happened, he's like, now people are going into this season acting like he's not one of the best quarterbacks in our own conference. And, when Leipold said, when Jalon's healthy, he's that dude. And so I think a healthy and confident Jalon, Leipold said that Jalon reminded him of where he was at a couple years ago. That version of Jalon Daniels can take this Kansas team beyond expectations this year.
Yeah, and I would be hard-pressed to disagree with the statement of he's one of the top quarterbacks in the conference when playing at his best, right? And that's going to be the key, is what was something you mentioned, which is, can he hit the ground running? Can he get going? And, hindsight is 20/20, but I think, and we talked about this a little bit last season over the course of the year as well, is that going back to this before the start of last year, Jalon Daniels was not fully healthy. And I think it's safe to say that the staff was maybe overly careful with him coming back to start the year, maybe just sort of expecting, hey, he's Jalon Daniels. There's not going to be any problems for him to start the year. And that ended up kind of not coming to fruition. I think it's easy to say that now. But listen, last year, if we were sitting here on July 9th, 2024, and somebody said, hey, Jalon Daniels he's getting to be fully healthy, but would you rather try to push him to do more stuff in fall camp, or, for lack of a better term, put him in bubble wrap until the season starts? I would say put him in bubble wrap. That's what I would have said last year. So it's easy to look back and say, okay, well, obviously that was mismanaged, I think, to a certain extent, about getting him reps in the preseason and in the fall camp and in the start of the season. I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. I don't think that's going to be something the Caves going to have to worry about. I think they can go full bore with Jalon Daniels from day one of fall camp to get him ready for the start of the year. And I think we'll see that that's going to make a significant difference. The other thing is, you mentioned about with Jim Zebrowski. Kevin, Jim Zebrowski is probably the most aggressive individual I've been around in terms of coaching style, in terms of, hey, if there's an opportunity to make a big play, go for it. If there's an opportunity to make a throw, do it. Essentially putting full trust in his players. And we saw that with Jason Bean. I think when you go back to the Guaranteed Rate Bowl in Arizona, where there was a lot of that. And what happened? Jason Bean threw for over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns.
He had like three interceptions, and
exactly,
and he never took his foot off the gas.
That was going to be my point. Was he did all those great things, and obviously also had made a couple of big turnovers as well. So maybe there's going to be a little bit of a finding a balance there with Jim Zebrowski saying, hey, go, and if you have the opportunity to make a good play, and Jalon Daniels having the confidence to do that, but also maybe having the understanding of making sure he's not doing that so much to where it's causing a lot of turnovers. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. I'll be very curious to what that looks like at the start of the year, especially if there's any sort of calibration phase, I guess, of turning that aggressiveness dial to the max versus what Jalon Daniels is capable of doing. And then something that we haven't talked about as much this offseason, but I think we both agree is going to be very important is going to be Jalon Daniels' legs as well.
Yeah.
So how aggressive is he in that area? Is he going to be fully prepared to take those hits and make those plays with his legs? Because I think we saw at times he maybe wasn't fully comfortable with doing that, especially early in the year last year. So I think there's a lot of questions still to be remained unanswered, but Jalon Daniels, from media day, at least my takeaway is he seems very confident. He seems certainly fully healthy. That was reiterated by himself and by Lance Leipold. He's handling the pressure of again representing this KU program. And that's not surprising. I mean, he's been at Big 12 Media Days, like 4 years now? I mean, he's been the face of KU for multiple years. So it's not like I was concerned about him not handling the media aspect of it very well. But that's all really positive signs that I think he's feeling comfortable and confident. And honestly, if I were Jalon Daniels, I would be at the point now where it's enough talk, let's go out and play. And luckily, he's not going to have to wait that much longer to do that. But hopefully he can ball out and really lead this Kansas team to a quick start in 2025 and even beyond.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Zebrowski too is when you talk to people, he's remarkably consistent, and I think that's a huge thing that a coach can be. And if Jalon goes out and throws a pick, he's going to tell Jalon, I love you. You're a playmaker. Like, go make the next play. If Jalon throws a touchdown, he's going to say, I love you. You're a playmaker. Go make the next play. And I think for a quarterback, for any quarterback, but particularly a quarterback like Jalon, to have, sort of, you hate to call it a safety blanket or security blanket, but to have somebody that exactly like, hey, this guy believes in me. He's going to trust me. It's not going to be, results. It's going to be more process oriented, etc. We could see a version of Jalon that's a lot closer to what we've seen of Jalon at his peak. And I'm glad you brought up the quarterback run game stuff, because you mentioned Jalon maybe not being 100%, comfortable with it. Jeff Grimes is not an option guy. It's not really what he does, what he's typically done. Lubick is an option guy with a lot of quarterback run stuff. You watch the stuff that he's done at Nevada, and I know we've talked about it on the show, but it's very easy to juxtapose Jalon Daniels on that Nevada quarterback and say, I can see Jalon running this and being really good at it. And so I fully expect there to be more of the varied option looks and things that we've seen in the past, and have that sort of married with Zebrowski wanting to attack down the field. And I think that there's a very real chance that this could wind up being, if not the Big 12's best offense, one of the best offenses that the Big 12 has had. By the way, Nick, over the last 3 years, if you're just looking at the number of times that Kansas has punted, Kansas was second to last in the conference 3 years ago, last in punts. So Kansas has been really good offensively under Lance Leipold. That includes, last year under Jeff Grimes, where they led the Big 12 in yards per play. I think they've led the Big 12 in yards per play maybe even 3 years in a row. I expect that it'll be another year where they're, at or around that top spot as one of the Big 12's best offenses again.
Hang on. Was that a subtle shot at the individual that may have replied to a tweet of yours previously about the punting situation?
No, I don't believe so, but it's still there. No, it was kind of interesting too. Kind of just a funny note. I was told while we were on here that the Jeff Grimes debacle question came from a Colorado reporter, and of course Kansas did not punt against Colorado, so that's kind of an interesting
interesting
thing. That if there was somebody who could go out there and be like, man, the Kansas offense is a debacle, I'm not sure it was it was Colorado.
Hey, that game was certainly a debacle for the Colorado defense.
Yes,
I mean, come on,
that one got out of hand. But yeah, that's kind of funny, just sort of how that works out.
Well, as you said, Kevin, Big 12 Media Days means one thing. The football season is right around the corner. Fall camp is coming up very soon. We'll have plenty of coverage from that. So you'll want to stay tuned to the show and to the channel for all that good stuff. You got any other final quick thoughts from Media Day? Anything that stood out to you from what Lance Leipold, Jalon Daniels, all the other players, anything like that you want to get out?
No, I don't think so. I think you can get a general feeling for what Lance is feeling. You know, he's not necessarily a hide the emotions type of guy, and Lance came off very much like he did this spring, Nick, and that I think that there's a confidence level there. I think he likes his team. I think he likes the work ethic of this team, and so as you said, now it's time to go out and play. But I do think that Lance is a guy that you can tell when he's frustrated, and I do not believe that to be the case right now. I think he's looking at this team and saying, hey, there's something here right now, and it seems like everybody is also excited for all the firsts that this year will bring with the new booth and all of that as well.
And we will be there on August 23rd to welcome Kansas to the new booth. Hopefully you'll be there as well, and also hopefully you'll be joining us for our live shows after all KU football games on our YouTube channel. Subscribe over there, share a comment, join the conversation, all that good stuff. But football season, it is right around the corner because Big 12 Media Days has happened, and Kevin Flaherty has declared that after Big 12 Media Days, football season is here.
It's the starting gun. If you run track, you know they fired the starter's pistol, and you just fired the starter's pistol on the 2005 football season. So,
well, there you go. 2025 football season. 2025.
Did I say 2026?
You said 2005. We're going back in time.
Dang. Well, that team went to a bowl game, Nick. So,
hey, there you go. Could that be words of prophecy for 2025? We'll find out. But once again, you'll definitely want to stay subscribed and stay tuned into our show and our channel. Thank you so much if you have already done those things. And thank you so much for your continued support of the show here. We're very excited for the upcoming season. But until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.